The legislation also mandates retention time of sexual assault kits. This allows the victim to have their kits still be able to be tested many years later. So the Jane Doe kits, in which the victim did not wish to be named to law enforcement, are, per the legislation, retained for 55 years. That gives those victims 55 years in which to change their mind if they wish to proceed with having their kit tested. They can go into iKits, it'll show them which law enforcement agency has that kit, and they can contact them about getting their kit tested. There are also mandates of 55 years or when a sentence is satisfied for the other sexual assault kits. And then those that were determined to be unfounded, where evidence existed that no crime was committed, those are still mandated to be retained for 10 years, just in case new evidence were to come to light. Those kits are not being destroyed. The agency does have the option of putting a kit destruction date when they plan to destroy the kit into the iKit system, which would also be visible to a victim going in to see the status of their kit.
You know, one of the things that I will tell you that we are struggling with, and this was something that was forecast, or, when we first started about the kits and how long we have to keep the kits and all that, we just recently were approved in our new budget for another secure refrigerator. Now, our number of kits on hand are probably a lot more than maybe a small sheriff's office, and maybe not as many as the city of Boise. But I think that at some point in time, legislatively, we may need to look to the state to assist. And maybe that's some of the smaller agencies first with some funding so that we can continue to store these kits properly, so that there comes a time in the future where they need to be tested, analyzed, et cetera, that they're still in the proper form. We just budgeted, I believe, $18,000 for a refrigerator here at Twin Falls City to add on to our capacity. And again, in a budget our size, that's a lot of money, but it's definitely not something that is out of line. But a smaller agency might struggle more. So I think as a member of the Idaho Chiefs Police Association, that's a conversation that we had back in 2015, 16, and now it's really coming to fruition. I know the city of Boise spent a lot of money a couple of years ago to revamp their evidence and their cold storage, and we all knew this was going to happen. This was a big this was a big conversation piece during this. In fact, it was probably one of the main reasons some practitioners pushed against the legislation. Now, at the end of the day, I'm proud to say that the Idaho Chiefs Police Association saw the benefit in the legislation, and the cost, the financial cost for storage space is nothing compared to trying to make sure we have these kits and they're ready if we need to offer some protection or help to a victim. So, please don't read into it that your chiefs or sheriffs are not wanting to help our victims, because we all get it. But we knew this was coming. And so when I saw it in our budget from my team here, about 9 months ago, I just kind of figured, well, I knew this was going to be coming, and here it is.
And so as someone who's been doing this for a little while yet, perhaps not 20 years, but for a while, if you were talking to a prosecutor who doesn't yet have a SART in their county, and we have a few of those yet in Idaho, what advice would you give to them? What would you say about the importance of a SART and how you would start that process?
First step is just get it on the calendar. Just put it down and then make it regular. As far as why you should have it and the value of it, I can't think of a better way to expose all the people that are working with victims of sexual assault to each other, so that there is a rapport, so there's a knowledge. So I can go, if I need to contact Detective so-and-so, I have a face to Detective so-and-so, and I have contact information, and I know the entities, and I know the supervisors. So if I can't get a hold of somebody, I know who I can call to leave messages for that person and things like that.
And so as you're looking at your SART here, And looking forward, as we're trying to address sexual assault in Idaho, where do you think we need to look and focus? What would you like to see the focus be as a state as we move forward?
Well, I will be honest, and this is, I don't like to get political or anything, but we just saw a pretty horrible example in Boise of someone victim shaming and making access to a victim's identity in a way that could be perceived as pressure for that person to recant. I don't know what the motivation there was, but I think what it illustrated for me was that there's still some very old ideas about victims of sexual assault, and we need to get our mindset in our community to the here and now, that these people are to be protected, they are to be believed, and they are to be provided with the accesses for them to heal. And that, like I say, that may look different for every single person that walks through the door, but we need to just get our mind thinking in a way to, our investigations should not traumatize them and re-traumatize them. My involvement with as a prosecutor should not add trauma to their situation, and that's hard because every time they talk about it, that is traumatizing. But we just need to have a more current mindset about what it means to be a sexual assault survivor and how we can help them and not add trauma to their lives. And that needs to be community-wide, statewide.
I think that would be a really interesting conversation going forward, and I think you're exactly right. Until we address some of the myths that society holds, and it sometimes is even seen in our professions, whether it's healthcare or law enforcement, or perhaps prosecution in some places. Some of these old myths really do need to be addressed, and until we can get that done, the work's going to be a lot harder. So we're not where we need to be. I think we've come a long ways, but there's still work to do.
I think so too. I think there's a lot of work to do, which is why it's good that we have our SAR up and running and we're meeting, and those lines of communication are open, and the back and forth of ideas and brainstorming is so helpful. And we've got a lot of things we're working on, and it'll be good to get some of those to a conclusion and have some good protocols in place and some of our ideas just solidified.
Oh, you know what? For me, having a mind shift of just really understanding that this was, this isn't just a job. This isn't just a call that I'm going out to. This just isn't just another report that I'm taking. This is somebody's mother, brother, son, daughter, grandma, and it could be yours. How would you want them to be treated? How would you want the professionals in your community to be trained? What we saw in those evaluations is key. We need to be trained. We need to, now that they've came and people from those agencies have heard what that actually was, because I think there's a lot of skepticism, like, how does that apply to my job? Like, why am I going to, a trauma-informed training? Why am I going to that? I work trauma all the time. I understand that. But when they come to the training, they understand it in a different way. So now we're hearing, wow, this needs to go out agency-wide. We need to be doing this across our entire state for all of our agencies. So I think that that's very valuable. But again, I really think that focus on supervisors who can hold people accountable for doing those investigations correctly, and chiefs of police and administrators who can make those top-down decisions in their organizations. I think that is, but they don't know. I mean, they don't know what they don't know. Probably many of them have made it through the ranks without ever having this training, without ever having this knowledge, without ever having the recognition of how much this impacts their community.
So sitting where we are now and being able, having the advantage of looking back and saying, we've gone through this, we're going forward, where do you think we really need to be looking now as we look toward the future?
That's a great question, Deb. I think that number one, we can't take our foot off the gas. We have to keep moving forward and trying to stay ahead of the game when it comes to this entire process. We need to continue to train our officers and our deputies, our nurses, our other clinicians, our lab technicians. We need to continue to train them so they have the best training, they have the best technology available, that they understand the impact of trauma to the human brain. It was not uncommon when I first started in 96, 97, 98 to question the veracity of a victim's statement. It was not uncommon. I'm ashamed to say that now, but the cop out is we didn't know any better. But we know better now. And so we need to be able to continue going forward as new research and new data comes out. We need to embrace that, learn about it. And if the data shows that is the way to go in our investigations and our processes, then we need to continue to do that. But ultimately, we just need to work really hard and continue to treat victims and anybody we encounter in these investigations with kindness. Kindness goes a long ways as a starter. And sometimes this might seem a little interesting to maybe other people that aren't in my chair, but sometimes it even goes with the suspects or the defendants. You have to have that. We have to have a conversation with them. We know that helps to build the case. We need to figure out the why they did what they did. Usually we already know what they did. Now we have to figure out the why. And as you know, in prosecution, for a rape case, as an example, you have to prove that the action was done without consent. And that is actually not an easy burden of proof in a court of law. So, of course, kindness for the victims, for their family and friends and their supporters, but sometimes even some kindness and decency towards those that have been accused of the crime, because ultimately we need to find out the truth. And it doesn't do any good to get upset and yell and scream at people that are accused of committing these crimes, regardless of what our thought is on that type of an act.
Innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, we're after the truth.
What are the changes you would like to see?
I would like to see us utilized more. I feel like we are very underutilized. We don't get called out when there's a bar strangulation. It's no different than a domestic strangulation. It actually might be worse because both parties may be intoxicated. So how much strength are they really applying to that? Like how much is the victim of that strangulation accounting to their intoxication versus the strangulation event? Same for intimate partner violences. Like we can go out and do all the documentation that law enforcement, their detectives are doing. We can help them with that. We can put it in a chart. We can organize the photos and make sure that we've got descriptions that are correlating and help them make their job a little easier, because we are taking the medical side of that and doing all of that documentation for them.
So in that case, what you're saying is we still focus on healthcare, but again, that's that intersection.
That intersection, like making sure that everyone knows when we can be called in. Like making sure our ED physicians know that just because they have a patient who is a victim of pediatric abuse, like yes, do your head to toe skeletal exam because that's going to tell you things that I cannot tell you. But if there's bruises, call me in. Let me document those bruises. Let me help you with that so that law enforcement then has that as well. And let me see that patient in 3 days. Let me see if these are bruises that are resolving or bruises that are evolving. Like, let's see if we can track how these bruises are evolving on this patient, and try to get like that pattern down a little bit. So I think that we can just be utilized in so many more ways than what we are. We are doing suspect exams. Which has been, we've done a few of them throughout the years, but we're making it a more regular part of our practice, which is interesting because you still bring that patient center and trauma focused care to this patient, because they are a patient, where law enforcement is like, oh, they're the suspect though, but they're still my patient. And so I think it just shows that we have the ability to be neutral when it comes to the person in front of us and care for the human that is in our care, and focus on the forensics as we move through that. Like there's always the human at the center of our care, and the forensics is the bonus.
If we had a SART team, if I could wave a magic wand and all the resources available, I would suggest similar to maybe Nampa Family Justice Center, where you might have not necessarily a criminal legal person or a community person, but somebody that's there running the show that doesn't have a stake in either of those systems, right? So a lot of times we kind of default to the prosecutor because we're thinking criminal legal processes, right? Of course, these are rape kits, et cetera. And so that person kind of takes the reins. I would say pull back on that. That person is a partner, a collaborator, but have somebody else to facilitate the team. And if you actually have the funding, have that person be the glue for the team, right? You all are busy. So you need somebody to hold the team together, to be able to take minutes and notes and make phone calls and call lunch, whatever it is. But I would say that's not the prosecutor. They're too busy. They're too busy. Give them a break. They're a team member. Get somebody else to facilitate it. Hire an executive director to put all those pieces together. That would be what I've learned. Yeah.
Don't burn out some of the team members themselves.
Right. And I think together collectively we could find resources and funding to create models like that. Where it's kind of this, I don't know if it's called a justice center or what it's called, but where you have all these team players together, but it's not under like a police or prosecuting title, because again, we know that people who've been harmed, they're scared to tell a friend, let alone somebody in a uniform. Doesn't mean the uniform's bad, it's just scary, right?
It is
They're
scary.
afraid that domino will go and then they'll all go. Mm-hmm. So we know that. So what do we do to decrease stress for somebody who's harmed that way? How do we put our egos in check? How do we fund it so it's actually a supportive, caring, healing place? That's the thing we forget. We get caught in catching the bad guy,
right?
And we forget about how to help somebody heal from one of the most harmful traumas they'll ever experience.
All right, and that wraps up the final video for today. And I have to say that is a remarkably collaborative effort. So with that, we're going to enter our final round of discussion. This one's a little bit longer, so make sure if you have any questions for our full panel, go ahead and type them into the Q&A pod. But other than that, I'm going to pass the microphone over to Matt.
Tyler, thanks so much. And I was really grateful that they rolled the credits there and gave credit to all of the members of our ISACI, our state working group, a phenomenal group of individuals. We're grateful to have them, many of them, with us today. So I wanted to finish with asking them some more questions and allowing you to participate with us. So first to Raylene, our state laboratory manager for the DNA unit. Question coming in from Gabriella. 55 years is a long time for retention of evidence. What do you think the DNA recovery is going to be in 55 years? What do you think about our evidence retention? Raylene?
If kits are stored properly, I think the recovery of DNA is feasible in 55 years. I think the oldest case I've worked that I can recall, I've been around a while, was I think about 30 years old. It had been stored in a cool, dry location, kept out of direct sunlight, and we were able to obtain DNA from that sample. So as long as they're stored properly, I think it will be feasible in 55 years to get DNA from a kit should someone choose to, at that point, have their kit tested. And technology is always getting better and better.
Yes, that's for sure. Tell us, Ebony's got a question coming in about comparisons done in CODIS. So are those continually being done? Do we compare the new stuff coming in to the older stuff that we have? Tell us again on that process.
Yes, so once a sample is entered into CODIS, it stays in CODIS unless, as mentioned earlier, we receive information that that was actually a consensual partner or a sample that should not have been in CODIS. We treat all kits the same as far as CODIS entry. So whether it's one of those normal priority, a rush priority, or a lower priority, if a sample's developed that's eligible for CODIS, it gets entered. CODIS does comparisons, I believe now, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe they're done daily now. It used to be weekly. I believe they're done daily now. So they're constantly getting compared to new samples that are being entered into the database. And we upload to the national database. So they're not only getting compared to our state database, but to the national database as well.
We've seen a dramatic increase in the number of hits that we're having in the lab. We have a question coming in from Venetia. Are we seeing in our state at least serial rapists? What are we seeing in the data coming in with our CODIS hits and linking investigations?
We do receive, we refer to it as a forensic hit when two evidence samples hit each other. We do see those. As far as serial rapists, again, I don't have all the data off the top of my head. I can remember two that we have identified through CODIS. A lot of times the agency will already know. They already know they're dealing with a serial offender. So linking those cases together in the database isn't information that those investigators hadn't already determined. So I can truly think of two that were identified through the database just off the top of my head for Idaho.
And I think that nationally will probably depend on the law enforcement agency, how many resources they had to put into that. What we're seeing from these previously unsubmitted kits, I know that the numbers coming out of Detroit were much higher on identifying serial rapists. I think our numbers have been lower, but certainly as Raylene is saying, we're definitely identifying those individuals that are the serial offenders. I want to move to a question that Paul spoke about, or Paul asked a question about regarding records retention. And this is something new for us that we're just starting to investigate. Deb, tell us about your work there.
Yeah, this actually became painfully apparent to us. Not too long ago, I had a law enforcement agency call me and tell me that one of the patients who had filed a John Doe kit after 12 years had come forward and wanted to open an investigation. And so their first step was to call the hospital where the kit had been collected and ask for that medical record. It had been destroyed. Now, that had been done totally in compliance with Idaho statute. So it wasn't that the hospital had done anything wrong at all. But what it did do was tell us that we absolutely have to address this. So I brought this to ISACI, and we have formed a subcommittee, and we are bringing people to the table. Again, all of the stakeholders who possibly can be affected by having to retain these records, really identifying the medical forensic record. As a nurse, I would tell you that's a healthcare record, right? We're addressing the healthcare of the patient. But as a SANE, I'm now understanding this is also evidence, and our law enforcement partners need that. So we need to come up with a process in Idaho that says we will address the needs of the healthcare and we will address the needs of the law enforcement. And so that conversation is just starting. We're going to decide what parts of that record are what needs to be kept, who's going to do that, how is that going to be done. So maybe we'll have a follow-up video someday to tell you how we solve that, but it's a very valid question. You can't keep just one piece of evidence and then 12 years later want to build a case.
I appreciate what you said about we're now having the research drive what we put into practice. And so we did the survey. We wanted to know what the hospitals were currently doing. That's probably not something we would have done historically. Now we are. Tomorrow's presentation, we'll tease that again. Please join us tomorrow because we'll be talking about how we've collaborated directly with our research partners at universities, at other places around the country to find out what is in our data that we weren't aware is in our data. What are we seeing that we were anecdotally thinking, but now we have the numbers to justify that. So again, please join us tomorrow for some amazing presentations by national experts. I wanted to also go back to another question that's coming in about the storage environment that we recommend for these kits for law enforcement. So first, Raylene, will you take that on? A little bit about what we've thrown out there for law enforcement, and then back to, we'll go to Chief Kingsbury after you.
Sure, and on that last question, I did want to add the laboratories record retention is based on statute of limitations. So for sexual assaults and homicides, because they have no statute of limitations, our policy is we retain those records forever. Going to the question about storage, it's a tiered system. We understand that Idaho's a very diverse state. We have some very populated communities that have a lot of funding and are able to invest. As Chief Kingsbury indicated, they've invested a significant amount of money in new refrigerators. Not all agencies have that level of resources available. So for the sexual assault kits, if they do not have a liquid blood, some of our old ones do, we ideally recommend that they be stored frozen. For if they do have liquid blood, ideally they should be stored refrigerated. Refrigerated storage would be next. And then if the law enforcement agency does not have access to that, then the next would be just a climate controlled environment where they are not exposed to heat, a lot of heat, sunlight, or UV radiation would be the next ideal. Understanding that resources are limited in some of our more rural communities.
Chief Kingsbury, let's come back to you. And we've seen you on video all day, but first time we've been able to interact with you live. We appreciate you making time in your very busy schedule as Chief of Police in Twin Falls to come and join us today. Tell us a little bit about your journey. You were in on the decisions to do kit retention. You've been in this working group from the beginning. Tell us where you're at. Tell us your perspective on the process and the value for you.
Thank you, Matthew. It's good to be here this afternoon. It has been kind of a busy yet cold day down here in South Central Idaho. As I said in the video, I kind of laughed when I saw that, talking about the budgeting for our new refrigeration unit. We actually are just in the process of ordering that. So we're excited here to get that on order. Going back, I think in 2015, for me as a chief of police, at that time I was the chief of the Nampa Police Department, got to work with Angela for several years. We kind of go way back. And at the time that the media started looking into our sexual assault kits in Idaho, I thought we were doing a good job. I thought we were doing things the right way. And it was very humbling to learn that we really were not. We were doing a disservice to our survivors, disservice to the system. And so it was time for us as police leaders, chiefs and sheriffs and others like Detective Weeks to move forward and learn. And I think we did that. Obviously in 2016, I represented the Idaho Chiefs of Police Association on the legislative committee to work with now Senator Wintrow and others, many others who are here today to start this legislation. As I said in the video, one of the biggest concerns from police chiefs and sheriffs was, oh my gosh, how are we going to store these? And as Raylene noted, we have different budgets. Idaho is probably like most states in this nation where we have 2- and 3-person law enforcement agencies to the Boise Police Department with over 300 and Ada County with, I think they have 500 or 600 total employees or even more. My department here in the city of Twin Falls, we have 105 employees, 77 sworn officer positions. We're a city of about 50,000. I believe, I was looking at the report last week, I think in 2021, we submitted something like 32 or 33 kits. So that's probably the average for us here is about 30 kits a year. And we know now that we're going to have to store those for the 50 plus years. It's not a huge issue for us. It's something that we budget for. It's something that we know we need to do. And as I said earlier, going forward, we just have to continue to do that. Because we know that we're going to make a difference. And whether it's a serial rapist that gets caught someday or just helping a survivor who maybe wanted an anonymous kit but changes his or her mind down the road, we want to be able to have that ability. Because as a police executive, it is really, well, it's just downright unnerving when somebody comes forward and you find out you no longer have the evidence needed to take a case forward. And we saw that in 2015 throughout this state. I saw that on cases that I personally had been involved in. So that was disheartening, and I really felt like we had let people down. So I'm hoping that at least as much as possible, we're going to be better prepared so that we don't let any of our survivors and our community's members down.
Thanks, Chief. I appreciate those comments. I'm going to turn it to our panel. If any of you have any closing comments, thoughts that you want to share with the group. Yes.
Okay. You know, the biggest thing for anybody who's listening to this that I think is a takeaway is really being willing to be transparent. Look at your own organization, look at your role within the whole system and the response that we have, and be willing to sit down and have collaborative conversations and have tough conversations about things that we have done wrong and ways that we can improve, and kind of put your personal feelings, if you can, aside and realize we're really doing this for the greater good of our community. That's what I just would encourage with everyone.
With that, I think we're going to close for the day. It's been a long day, but a fantastic day. We've collaborated a lot. We've shared a lot of information. We've been able to share some email addresses and phone numbers so that we can reach out and get even more information. We're happy to share what we're doing. We're not saying that that's the perfect way to do things. We've got a lot to learn from all of you, and we appreciate you sharing with us today. So with that, we hope that you'll join us tomorrow, again, for a second day focused more on research and what the data we're seeing from our processing of sexual assault kits is showing us here in Idaho, and what we're learning and how that might implement future improvements for our state and for the nation. So again, please join us tomorrow. Appreciate your attendance today. And with that, I'll turn it back to Tyler.